I think so. Alexis, if you are ready, I'll hand it over to you.
I will turn it over to our clerk, Justin, to give his instructions.
Great. All right, one moment. I will share the agenda. Are you seeing the agenda for right now?
Nope, you'll have to read it, please.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
It's,
Understood.
I mean, I don't know if you sent it in advance, but I'm sorry if you did because I didn't see it. So thank you for reading if you don't mind.
Okay, understood. Thank you, Peggy. I will first begin by calling the roll, and then I'll move into the webinar logistics after that. So to begin, I'll call the roll. Ana Gonzalez. Peggy Martinez.
Here.
Michelle Rousey.
Here.
William Walker.
Present.
We have a quorum for this meeting. I want to move into webinar logistics. Welcome everyone to the August 5th, 2024 Interagency Transportation Equity Advisory Subcommittee meeting on walkability, disability, and complete streets. This committee's focus will be on elevating diverse and historically marginalized voices and will advise the California Transportation Commission, California State Transportation Agency, and California Department of Transportation on how to achieve meaningful outcomes in transportation equity, environmental justice, and equitable economic opportunities, especially as related to transportation planning and programming. The meeting agenda is located on the Commission's website at www.catc.ca.gov. Any document created for this committee can be translated into any language you need. Simply email us at transportationeac@dot.ca.gov, and we'll have them returned to you as quickly as possible. American Sign Language translation is being provided for this meeting. You should see them on your screen. Spanish translation is also being provided. You can access this service through the Interpretation tab at the bottom of the screen. You can use the Q&A tab if you have questions about this. Live closed captioning is also available. Please select the Show Captions tab at the bottom of your screen. There are a number of language options available there to choose from. Presenters, if you're on the agenda to make a presentation, please do your best to be succinct. Please remember to speak at a steady pace to allow our translating services adequate time for accurate translations. If you're presenting remotely, we hope that you'll turn on your camera during your presentation if you have one. Members of the public, we welcome comments from the public as a part of each item at this meeting. For those attending via Zoom, you should see the webinar control panel likely located on the bottom of your screen. There you'll find the raise hand and Q&A tabs. We encourage you to use the raise hand feature as soon as we reach the item to give the system time to acknowledge you. Committee staff will let you know when it's your turn to make your comment. Alternately, you may use the Q&A tab to submit your comment. Committee staff will read the comment on your behalf. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link and phone number to access the webinar. These should not be shared with other participants, as this can create confusion for staff when making comments. Do your best to be concise. Remember to speak at a steady pace to allow our translating services adequate time for accurate translations. Make sure that your comments add new information. If you agree with the comments of a previous speaker, simply make that statement. We ask that you make your point in 3 minutes or less. If for some reason we have many speakers on any single topic, we reserve the right to limit comments to 1 minute if needed. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Justin, for reading.
Thank you, Justin. And I'll go ahead and read the full agenda before starting. But first, I'm Alexis Lance. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Assistant Deputy Director for the Director's Office of Equity and Tribal Affairs at Caltrans. Today's agenda includes our tribal acknowledgement. Then item number 3 will be public comment on non-agenda items. Item number 4 will be brainstorming of topics and areas of interest for the ad hoc subcommittee. Item 5 will be discussion of ad hoc subcommittee meeting schedule. Item 6 will be discussion and possible action to elect an ad hoc subcommittee chair. And item 7 will be wrap up and next steps. I will go ahead and begin with our tribal acknowledgement. Because staff are located in Sacramento, we are utilizing the California Native American Legislative Caucus land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the ancestral homelands of the Nisenan, Southern Maidu, Valley and Plains Miwok, Patwin, Wintun, and Wilton Rancheria peoples of the land on which we work on today. Even further, recognize that all Native American peoples have a deep connection to the land and have made significant contributions to the broader community throughout California, our states, and the world. Since we are meeting virtually and members are calling in from around the state, I welcome you all. If you would like to make tribal acknowledgements, you can unmic and please do so.
William Walker from San Francisco on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land.
All right, is there any public comment on this item?
I'm not seeing any request to comment at this time.
Okay, I will take us to our next agenda item, which is public comment on non-agenda items. Clerk, are there any public comments?
I'll give our virtual attendees a few more moments. A reminder that you may use the virtual hand raise feature, and I will then call on you, or you can submit a written comment that can be read on your behalf. And I'm not seeing any requests to comment at this time.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to Carolyn for agenda item number 4, brainstorming of topics and areas of interest for the ad hoc subcommittee.
Great. Thanks, Alexis. Good afternoon, folks. I'm Carolyn Abrams, and I'm a senior advisor on race and equity in the Caltrans Director's Office of Equity and Tribal Affairs. I use she, they pronouns, and today I am wearing a blue collared shirt with glasses. I want to give you all a little bit of context, and I apologize to Michelle, who has already heard this, and to William, who has already heard this just probably 15 minutes ago. This will be a repeat, but I want to make sure this information is provided for each of the subcommittees just so that we have a good foundation on which to build. So I'll start with some context around the purpose of these ad hoc subcommittees and then the criteria for how we assign work to this subcommittee. And I want to start by saying that just as a refresher, this subcommittee, along with the 2 other ad hoc subcommittees, were created back at the April EAC meeting. And so we have the Walkability, Disability, and Complete Street Subcommittee, which is this one, convening for the first time. Earlier, we had the Housing, Infrastructure, and Broadband Subcommittee, which convened for the first time. And then tomorrow, we will have the Safety and Climate Subcommittee convene for the first time. So when these subcommittees were created, the EAC discussed a number of topics that the subcommittee could focus on. And we wanted to kick off the discussion today by providing a starting place for you all in terms of some of the items that staff think would be a good fit for this subcommittee based on the work plan. And then we will open it up primarily for most of the time to have a discussion and to hear from you all around what items you're hoping this subcommittee could accomplish or work on in the span of the next year. So before we do that, I just want to reiterate that there's a difference between ad hoc subcommittees and permanent subcommittees. This is an ad hoc subcommittee, so as it stands right now, it is temporary. It is tasked with a very clear goal, and the timeline of the subcommittee is that it will sunset either after that goal is accomplished or within 1 year's time of its creation. So that takes us really actually to April of 2025, since that's when the subcommittee was formed. As a subcommittee, not only do you have subject matter experts in this group, but you can also consult with external stakeholders, community members, and other policy experts to inform your subcommittee work. And this subcommittee will be responsible for reporting out on its efforts at each of your standing EAC meetings. So that reporting back to the full committee. And if this subcommittee was in a position where they wanted to propose recommendations to be adopted by the whole committee, you could take action to do that. You would pass a motion at a subcommittee meeting, and then at a full committee meeting, you would make sure that that item is on the agenda for the committee to possibly adopt the recommendations of the subcommittee. And then any recommendations that are adopted by the full committee would be put forward to staff, and then staff will make sure that those recommendations are brought to the appropriate agency or agencies. So, a couple things to keep in mind in terms of the scope of work for this subcommittee. Any focus area that this subcommittee decides to work on must fall within the larger committee scope, so the full scope of the EAC.
Carolyn, sorry.
Focus.
Do you want to show the
Go ahead,
slide?
sorry.
Do you want to show this slide?
Sure, I can do that. I know some folks already saw this slide, and then I wanted to make sure I was just reading it word for word for Peggy, since these I think are posted, will be posted.
Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, it was just still showing the agenda. I wasn't sure if you were going to show this slide.
Yeah, let me see. Okay, looks like I have permission. Let me pull these up. All right, can I get a thumbs up from one of my coworkers? Can you see the slides?
We
see the presentation mode.
Yeah, it's not,
Let me try it again.
Oh.
Okay, Alexis or Sequoia, can you now see the slides?
yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so again, Michelle and William, you already saw this, and Peggy, I'm just reading verbatim what's on the screen. And this is just an overview of the kind of context for subcommittees and ad hoc subcommittees specifically, and then just criteria that give folks a sense of what falls within the scope of work of a subcommittee. So, in addition to the topic areas that the subcommittee chooses to address, that the fact that they must fall within the committee scope, they ideally will also align with the interagency work plan. This is really a list of those big ticket items where our agencies have identified the need for advisory support by the EAC. And another criteria that we need to keep in mind is that committee members need to have both the interest and also the capacity to serve on this subcommittee and work on the items that are brought before the subcommittee. This is obviously voluntary, and we don't want to overtask you all with work. So we've got that component, and we also want to keep in mind the consideration that interagency staff need to have adequate capacity to support subcommittee activities. And the biggest piece of that is really the administrative aspect of these meetings being publicly noticed. So the fact that there will always need to be a staff member available to host the subcommittee meeting, make sure that we have interpreters available, make sure that we can host on Zoom, get all of our meeting materials and agenda remediated and posted 10 days in advance, things like that. Those are just logistics to keep in mind. And then finally, anything that this subcommittee does just needs to be allowable within the committee charter. And another note on that, the committee charter can always be amended. It will just need to be done so with a vote of the full committee. So let me pause there before we open this up for discussion on actual subcommittee work. Are there any questions about the guidelines or criteria or context that we are operating within? Yes, Peggy, go ahead.
Well, I'm curious about the subcommittee being formed in April, and then us being our first meeting happening in August, and it ending in April. of 2025, which basically gives us, 4 months less time to sort of create something potentially. I mean, we might not need the time. I was just curious as to how that sort of came about, that the committee could potentially end in April of 25 if we, don't really get the time to meet.
Yeah, it's a great question, Peggy. So the way the charter is currently written is that any ad hoc subcommittee will either come to a close whenever its task has been accomplished or 1 year from the time that it's been created. Obviously, there has been a significant delay between the creation of this subcommittee and this kickoff of the subcommittee. I think we can do one of two things. Either we play it by ear throughout the year and see if this committee needs more time to complete its work. And in that case, we can always put forward a recommendation or a motion to create a permanent subcommittee focused on walkability, disability, and complete streets. That would be an amendment to the charter. And then this subcommittee, would operate in perpetuity, right? So there would be no tight deadline for when it would sunset. The other thing we could do is that depending on how the work of the subcommittee goes, if folks think that they can accomplish the work of the subcommittee prior to April and there's no need to continue it, that's also fine. And Sequoia, I'm going to lean on you for this one. I don't know the way that the charter is currently written. This might be a question for Anne, but maybe it's 1 year from the kickoff of the subcommittee and not the formation of it. But I think the way it's written is that it's 1 year from the formation of the subcommittee. Just wondering if we have any leeway with that.
Yeah, and I think, I think there's a little more flexibility if we're actively involved in something that it's just mostly it's a determinate time. So yeah, and if also, well, I won't repeat what Carolyn has said, but we could always make it permanent. But
Okay,
I think
thank you.
Flexibility.
Okay, you guys, sorry about the weird way I raised my hand. I don't actually know the command to do the hand raise on Zoom. So just wanting to say that I know it's different. But yeah, both of those answers are perfectly logical and sensible. I just wanted to discuss them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for raising that, Peggy. It's a good point to bring up. And again, and just to reassure folks, if this subcommittee starts working on certain tasks that you think would be better suited for their own subcommittee or a group of subject matter experts, we do have a lot of options for how this work actually gets done. And I think today can just be a jumping off point for thinking through what some of those items might be that the subcommittee tackles. And then we can also start thinking through the actual timeline and kind of the realistic logistics of that.
Cool.
Okay, and William, I see your hand, so go ahead. William, you are on mute.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to say to Peggy's comment, Member Martinez's comment about just the timelines. It's one of the reasons that when I proposed the 3 committees is that I just proposed 3 committees is because I didn't think that as the organizations are set up right now, I didn't think that there was capacity for us to do more than 3 committees, and the fact that it took 3 months to get to this point is proof of that. One thing I think that we'll need to have a discussion about is our charter. And when we polled everyone about their interests, only the vice chair, Martha Armas-Kelly, and I expressed interest in governance. But what you're talking about is a governance issue. And maybe with the 3 committee chairs and the chair and the vice chair, we can have a discussion about that and possibly create a committee there to discuss amending our charter. But I mean, the simplest way would just be to say that we do another ad hoc committee with the same title for another year. So there's nothing that prevents that. And cool. That's the one option don't think was shared. And the other options that Sequoia and Carolyn mentioned, I think are also applicable. But yeah, so that's just my comment on that.
Yeah, thank you, William. And yeah, back in April, that was sort of what we coalesced around, is that in terms of staff capacity and then member capacity, 3 subcommittees was probably the right fit. Obviously, you all have seen that in the meantime, you know, we created the CAPDI ad hoc subcommittee. So there's always some flexibility with it, and it can always be something we revisit. And William, I hear your point about maybe having some designated folks to consider any amendments to the charters. That's something we can come back to as well. Okay, so let me, I'm going to move on to the next slide, and I want to refresh everyone's memory to what is included in what we're referring to as the interagency work plan. This is something that was brought forward to you all at the May executive EAC meeting. These are some of the big ticket items that our agencies have identified as where we need advisory support. This is not an exhaustive list, but this is a starting place for you know, some of what our agencies are prepared to work on and where we would like EAC input. So I bring this up, and I'll read through the list again, but I bring this up because we think as a starting place, some of these items would be well suited for this subcommittee. And then we'd love your reactions and responses to these ideas. And then in addition to that, we want to capture from you all what else you want to work on and what you think this subcommittee could accomplish. So before I open it up for discussion, on the Caltrans side, the work plan items that we have identified include the development of use cases for the Caltrans Equity Index. We also have identified the need for advisory support around our community engagement guidelines and policies. And then finally, there is the anticipated need for support with any future updates to the Caltrans system investment strategy. And then on the CTC side, there are a number of program guidelines where we've identified, oh yeah, sorry, Peggy.
What was that? What was the last Caltrans idea? I wrote the first 2. Oh, wait, let me just ask you this. Rather than you have to tell me, this is all in the agenda and it's going to be sent, right? I mean, I'm going to receive, I think Sequoia just sent it. I don't want you to have to repeat too much because I don't want to take too much time away from the actual work. So anyway, yeah, carry on. Just carry on with CTC stuff. Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries, Peggy. And we will make sure these slides do get posted. And when they're posted, we will send them out to the subcommittee members so that you have them just for your notes.
Cool.
But to answer your question, and it's not a problem to repeat it, the last piece was the Caltrans system investment strategy.
Thanks.
And then on the CTC side, there are a number of programs where we anticipate needing advisory support on either updating the guidelines language or other equity aspects of those programs. This includes the Active Transportation Program, the Local Transportation Climate Adaptation Program, or Senate Bill 1 programs, or SB 1 programs. There's also the State Highway Operations and Protection Program guidelines. We have tolling guidelines. And finally, there is the efforts around equity and road charge statewide outreach and the state and local transportation needs assessment. And then finally, on the CalSTA side, there's the ongoing work of the Transit Transformation Task Force and the anti-displacement memo, which I think we realized at the last subcommittee meeting, we need an updated timeline on that, which we can track down from CalSTA and let you all know the current status of that work. But you all have heard about the anti-displacement memo at a couple of your standing EAC meetings, so it's a continuation of that. Okay, William, I'm not sure if this is an old hand or a new hand.
It's an old hand, sorry.
Okay, so Michelle, I'll pass it to you. I see your hand.
In the last subcommittee an hour ago, it was brought up around, and I know that subcommittee is meant to be more around housing and stuff, but I just want to put out there that there's a cross theme that we need to be aware of, that when we're talking about walkable communities and being disabled friendly and with our transportation, that, you know, that housing aspect and affordability and everything else has to be part of the equation. And I'm wondering how this committee can bring out those disability and senior issues into what we decide to work on, and make them a priority, and have more equity in what we do.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. And William, go ahead. Or yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. I didn't want to be rude because my hand wasn't up, but I do have a comment. I think about paratransit when I think about this committee. I think about how my mom often has to call me and ask me to send her an alternate to paratransit, because paratransit didn't come because they didn't have enough drivers that day. I also see a lot of what's called flex transportation. San Mateo County has demand response transit in East Palo Alto area, where you call a number and it's a software very similar to a ride hailing software that will pick you up. Vehicles just roam the neighborhood. I want to know why we don't just make all paratransit like this, and we look at the load factor of bus lines that are operating below a profitable load factor, and we just deploy ride hail vehicles, but that are under the umbrella of a transit agency. And that could be the new mobility for folks who, A, can't use fixed route service, but would benefit from an increase in service, and B, folks who just don't use fixed route service because it doesn't meet their needs. This paratransit ride hail merger could help facilitate that. I also have been going to school on a campus where the main street through campus has a speed limit of 45 miles an hour in Orange County. And I think it's crazy that the main street of our campus, Campus Drive, is, is that fast, and why we create spaces that aren't walkable. And clearly the active transportation program was being proposed for cuts. I think some of that money was reinstated, but I think that would be a great discussion for this committee to help prioritize how that money would be spent. I was on a call with where that discussion was happening amongst MPO representatives, and I felt that the voice of the riding public and of folks who use active transportation facilities, and folks who are who have physical challenges, ambulating or walking around the community, moving around the community, that voice was missing. So those are some of the ideas that I have, and I think it would be great, since this is the same slide that was at the last committee, and I presume it will be the same slide that will be presented at the next committee tomorrow. Maybe we could have an exercise at the next committee meetings that ranks these as items that whether the committees want to discuss them as a committee or not, so that we can at least understand if there's overlap, and maybe that will help us decide if we need to adjust the existing committee structure. So I hope that wasn't too much, but thank you.
Peggy here. I want to ask this question because, William, I think that maybe this may address some of this, and same with Michelle's concern. So I don't know which of the agencies would, does actually work with the, the paratransit and the actual, transit operating and whatnot. But if it seems to me that we are being asked to help to, and please, staff members, help me if I'm mishearing or misunderstanding. But what it sounds like is that we are going to have an opportunity to look at language and language is where policy is, and policy is where things, I mean, it's kind of a slow boat in a way, but that is how I see our voice being able, with limited time, limited capacity, all the rest, having the language inserted into all of these various places, into the shop language, into the active transportation language, whatever it is, any language that we can influence, then we can, then we have some power. So wherever paratransit might sit, I mean, to me, it's kind of a language question. It's and so I want, and this whole engagement thing, and helping Caltrans do what it wants to do, CTC what it wants to do. Obviously, the updating guidelines. I mean, that's where where we can really be of some value. So, like, there are specifics, but there's like a lot of generality that I think if we can address some of these things that these guys want us to address, that it will affect the sort of the gestalt, the entirety of how things are done in the state. So so staff, whoever can answer this question.
Can I take a stab at it?
Yes,
Carolyn?
please.
Okay.
Yeah, please, Sequoia.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think partially kind of focusing on the concept of transit, there are a lot of opportunities within this published work plan, as well as in opportunities that haven't been kind of like officially brought into the work plan, but that are in the works. And really it's kind of a coming together of our staff getting these priorities back out into our broader teams at our agencies and saying, like, these are priorities of the committee, of the subcommittees. What do you got? We have FTA 5310, for example, which has already come to the committee as a whole. We have right here, we have under CalSTA, the Transit Transformation Task Force, which is underway, which could probably hold a lot of this conversation as well. But I just want to, note that this is not a final or exhaustive list that we're presenting. This is just where we're at in the work plan development, and having this scoping discussion can help us bring appropriate opportunities to this committee. Or the subcommittee, I also want to just add that one thing staff, we're kind of refining our understanding of too is, for example, if a disability or walkability complete streets perspective is being given for one of these items, can the other groups work on a different portion of that item via like bringing the housing perspective, kind of like what Michelle was mentioning. So that's something we're going to like hash that out and figure out, because I know that two subcommittees can't work on the same thing, but if we're working on different parts of it, I want to get a better sense of how that can work, because I agree, Michelle, that there are going to be aspects of these programs and projects that we don't want to miss, just because like the housing group is already working on something. So I'll stop there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for adding that, Sequoia. And Peggy, I think you make a really good point around language being equivalent to policy implementation, being equivalent to, change and impact. And so if that's a interest area of the subcommittee, we can make sure that, already from some of the work plan opportunities, that these, whether they're program guidelines or other processes or policies that you all can weigh in on, that we bring those forward. Or if there are other ones where we want to go back to the agencies and say, hey, we have this expertise among these subcommittee members, and they are interested in, weighing in on X, Y, and Z, where can we plug them in? We can continue that process as well. But I'll stop there. Michelle, I see your hand, so go ahead. You've been patiently waiting.
I really like what you just said about, making sure that we're engaged in the different areas. that we have the expertise to do so. I really like that. I like what Chair Walker said about the accessibility of paratransit, and that needs to be able to change. We should be able to, those of us who need paratransit with mobility devices or other needs of same-day transit, that it isn't available throughout the state, and in many areas that it's still to this day not available the same day have a paratransit van come pick you up. So, you know, I think, and I also liked what Peggy said, and you know, and us using language to, I guess, get across those barriers that we've found in the past, where we need to be involved in some of the changes that are made in transportation throughout the state.
It's about elevating it, and you guys have heard me sort of go on about this at other meetings. It's about inclusive language, making sure that disability is there, and, you know, some specificity around disability. So, because there's kind of a little bit of a, you know, we do say a lot in you know, in DEI language about race and about gender stuff, which is all great, and access and disability isn't often included. So I'm just saying, we just gotta, wherever we can insert this and have this be inserted across the board. I mean, not just in what we produce, or not just in how we, you know, in the specifics of what we give input on, but that we have an understanding and agreement from all three agencies that wherever changes are made in their language, that, you know, disability and access and disabled access is included, because I just don't see it. And that's, I mean, I just think it's just one of those things that needs to be there. It's not, certainly not a be all end all. It's just one thing. And when I look at documents and other language, I just don't see disabled access there, or it's at the, like at the end or whatever. It's not like in the mix of things. It's sort of an afterthought. So I just think there's got to be a way to have disability access as basically as an equal and visible part of any policy discussion. Because I think 25% of the population having a disability is a significant thing. So that's kind of, you know, I think you guys have heard me say this before.
Yeah, thank you, Peggy. That's a great input. I've captured that in the notes. Sequoia, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I am wondering if Michelle could weigh in on a little bit more is you know, recognizing, Michelle, that you are the chair of the Transportation Subcommittee for the Disability and Aging Community Living Advisory Committee. You know, and I know that your group has done a lot of deep dives and a lot of policy recommendations already. I'm wondering if you could see any like gaps where this committee on this side could help fill in, kind of related to the scope of where we're functioning. But I would really be interested in hearing about, yeah, like how we can just engage with what the Transportation Subcommittee has been doing, as well as where we could help, or where we could have some focus that can just expand and broaden the reach.
You, I think, you know, some of what we've been doing is looking at state and local transportation with that assessment, but also, you know, there's been focus groups of people and seniors who use those transits, and I think, you know, to get down to the nitty gritty to what is needed for those people in that population, and that there's so many gaps in what services that we provide right now, and so many times their voices aren't heard. And part of the reason why I got on the equity committee is to hopefully promote the, on an equity side across the board, from all transit, that not only is our voices heard, but also that, like Peggy said, the words matter, and our wording isn't in there. Even in our state aging plan, the transportation portion that we proposed was gutted initially. So it just gives you an awareness that we are low on the totem pole when it comes to agencies recognizing not only equity, but a disability angle for our seniors and people with disabilities. So I think whatever we can do to put a focus on different areas and making sure that that language is there, that we bring people into the fold that understand the importance of having different disability language in it, because it promotes accessibility for all and not just for seniors and people with disabilities. Does that make sense?
Yep, it totally does.
Yeah, thanks.
If I may add a couple of thoughts in addition to the paratransit ideas that William and Michelle have raised, for, just as potential, but I mean, I know we have limited capacity. I would like to learn more about, or maybe provide input on what's kind of, I mean, like in the state budget, I mean, maybe that's the bill that Michelle was just talking about that just got totally, the funding has been reduced, but like active transportation, a lot of people with disabilities walk, they don't drive. Sidewalk safety, high visibility crosswalks, accessible pedestrian signals. I mean, we know that some of that stuff is sort of, mandated. But there's still, I mean, slowing people down, like William said, the 45-mile-an-hour thoroughfare on a college campus is shocking. I mean, it's unbelievable that could be. So some of these kinds of systems that are allowed to occur, I mean, with the vast and huge number of pedestrian deaths, I mean, it's really hard to even know where to start. But reducing that by slowing people down or by doing other, means to slow motorists down, essentially. That would be interesting too. I mean, that would be on my agenda, seeing how we can save some lives.
Mine too. I think this is Michelle Rosby. I would promote, if there's areas that we want to like pick today, I think some of the areas that we've been popping on would be good. How the community is engaged, guidelines and things like that. And I don't know how the other people in the group feel, but I know we need to move forward because we're close to ending. So I'm leaving it at that.
I don't know if anyone sees my hand, so I'm gonna just jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, William.
Hi. I think that I served on an active transportation committee for the creating what was called the Active Communities Plan in San Francisco for basically the new bike ped plan for the city. And what I found with the plan, even though they renamed it Active Communities because they wanted to include more than just biking and pedestrian, policies that generally are thought of for folks who are able to walk or ride bikes. I found that the work that we did was still very ableist, and that a lot of the policies that were being implemented wouldn't have helped my mom, who is disabled and has been my whole life. And so, you know, we came up with interventions. Like I said, any bike lane facility that we were considering in San Francisco moving forward should accommodate folks that roll, folks that are in ambulatory devices. You know, so a bike lane could ostensibly be used by someone in a walker, someone in a wheelchair. And if you needed to go faster than those folks, then maybe you should be on the actual roadway. And that would actually create roadways that are more appropriate. Because if it's a roadway that's used by lots of folks on, you know, walking and rolling, then ostensibly maybe there should be less roadway space. And then that would, you know, by default, slow vehicles down. And so I think that policies are a part of it, as Member Martinez stated, but I think the other piece of this work is actually trying to fill in, as Sequoia stated, fill in gaps that our policies don't actually reach. You know, the regulations that govern paratransit, for the most part, were written immediately after the Civil Rights Act. And, you know, there were no Waymos, there were no driverless cars in 1974. And driverless cars still don't seem to accommodate folks that are disabled. So I think that if we just rely on the regulations that exist and we just work within those frameworks, right now we're working within those frameworks, and there are, you know, portions of the population that don't benefit from the transportation advances that we've made. So I hope that the policy updates and the guidelines updates can be a yes and the ideas that we've come up in the last within the last 20-30 minutes are the and part of that. Yes.
Because I mean, we know that there are a lot of best practices out there. And just a thought on bike lanes. I mean, yeah, shared use paths are a very big, you know, it's part of walkability, and there are, you know, actual materials that can separate a bicycle path from the pedestrian side. And, you know, it's something that bicycles can roll over, and something that can be managed by a wheelchair user as well. It's just, you know, it's this trapezoidal linear indicator. It's a tactile thing that you can feel with your cane, and it's a pretty usable thing. So there's a lot out there. And yeah, William, I fully hear you on the old policy versus new policy and the yes and idea. And because, you know, yeah, there's best practice, and we know about that, and there's a lot of research on what works, because policy is slow and it does take time and whatnot. And you know, yeah, and I know we're out of time. So yeah, I mean, we didn't really predict driverless cars, and even in 1990 when the ADA was signed.
I'm just gonna jump in and just do a time check, because we do have a couple more things to get through on the agenda. And I'm sorry to disrupt this really great conversation. I know we've been really hungry to be able to just kind of brainstorm in this way, and acknowledging that this really is kind of a kickoff of a brainstorm, and we, you know, are taking copious notes, but also, you know, we anticipate that this will be iterative and will continue to bring back, you know, ideas and continue this conversation. So just thank you for all this great discussion.
Yeah, and I'll echo that. Thanks, Sequoia, also for this time check. So, William, I see your hand up. Did you want to add something, or did you have a question?
Sorry, old hand. My apologies.
Okay. No worries. Okay, I know we are almost at time, so I'm going to shift us to the next agenda item, which is about how often this subcommittee wants to meet. And I'm hoping that maybe in the next couple minutes, we could identify that cadence, and then we could also appoint a subcommittee chair. So, Alexis, do you want me to toss it to you to kick that off?
Sure
I know
thing.
okay, it's all yours.
All right, so subcommittee meeting schedule. So really this is up to you all. The only constraint to be aware of is that because these meetings have to be publicly posted, we need at least 10 days beforehand to post, and staff needs some time, you know, obviously to get materials remediated and what have you. That said, it's up to you all if you'd like to meet monthly, every other month, something, you know, along that line. For help with this conversation, our next EAC meetings obviously coming up on August 22nd. After that will be October 24th and December 4th. So, you know, you could try to at least meet once before each of for the October and December meeting. You could meet monthly, which would be a meeting in September and a meeting in October, and then November, and then you can meet after the EAC meeting in December, and we could work on scheduling beyond that as well. I'm happy to send out a scheduling poll, but just want to open it up for you all as to what works in terms of meeting. And I do see Michelle's hand raised.
Good with once a month for now, unless we figure we want to meet more.
I agree with once a month.
Okay.
I think that the first Monday at whatever time we met today, you know, that could work.
Okay. I see head noddings from William and Michelle, I believe. Okay. So I will note Mondays are preferred first Monday, but I will do a scheduling poll just to make sure Mondays, you know, because there's always those things that come up.
Like the first Monday of September is a holiday, I just remembered. So there you go.
So I'll send out a poll just to confirm, and then we'll move forward. Okay, then I will turn it back over to Carolyn for the discussion around a committee chair.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Alexis. I think we can do this pretty quickly, but I just want to let folks know that with the creation of this ad hoc subcommittee, there is an opportunity to appoint a subcommittee chair. So we can do that today, or if folks are not prepared to take action on this today, we can always move this to the next subcommittee meeting. But very briefly, the subcommittee chair would be responsible for reporting out at each of the full EAC meetings on the activities of the subcommittee, and also introducing any recommendations or actions that the subcommittee would like the full EAC to consider. And the subcommittee chair would also be responsible for facilitating these meetings. That way it is a member-driven, member-led effort. And also they would work with staff on developing the agenda and any other materials that need to get posted in advance of these subcommittee meetings. So we have an opportunity right now to take nominations for a subcommittee chair, or if folks would like more time to think on this, we can always bump this to the September subcommittee meeting.
I nominate Michelle. If she'll do it.
I'll second it.
If I do it, I'm gonna need a lot of staff support and support from you as members, because my capacity to do it is limited, and I have health concerns coming up the next few months, and I don't know my capacity past the middle of this month right now.
Then do you think it's reasonable then, Michelle?
Yeah, I'd be okay doing it, but I just want to put it out there that I need a lot of staff support and member support. I'm fine with being chair.
Whatever you need.
Okay.
I will help
Absolutely.
you.
Yeah. It sounds like you have the full support of the subcommittee and absolutely the full support of staff, Michelle. So the motion the motion on the floor is that Michelle Rousey would be appointed as subcommittee chair of the Walkability, Disability, and Complete Streets subcommittee. So Justin Hall, can I ask you to do a roll call vote?
Yes, will do. Ana Gonzalez. Peggy Martinez.
I affirm.
Michelle Rousey.
Yes.
William Walker.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you, clerk. All right, Michelle, thank you, thank you, thank you. We will have you as in this leadership role for the subcommittee. Before I close this out, are there any questions or anything else that folks want to raise for this group? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I will, oh, I'm so sorry. Is there public comment on this item?
Thank you, Carolyn. Yes, we did receive one written comment. Came in a little bit earlier. Comes from Ryan Carrillo Kovac, who attended the earlier subcommittee meeting. They write, attended the previous meeting. Land use and strict zoning are obstacles to implementation to new concepts. Thank you. And that concludes all submissions or requests to comment at this time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Perfect. I will adjourn this meeting at 4:03 p.m. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.